Hello, this is Matt Singer. I'm the Arts and Culture Editor at Willamette Week, and my guest today is Tom Roick. He is the Air Quality Monitoring Manager for the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Tom, thank you so much for talking today.
Thank you.
So, we in Portland have been living with air quality that has vacillated between very unhealthy and hazardous for about a week now. Um, do you have any conception of how unprecedented this is?
Yeah, it's certainly true. We are experiencing record poor air quality in Oregon across the state and have been for a few days now. So yes, we actually looked back at some information we have on certain cities: Portland, Eugene, Bend, Medford, and Klamath Falls as well. And we're actually seeing the highest conditions, smoke-related conditions in those cities that we have seen historically. So hazardous air quality in all of those locations. And it's not just that the measurements are high, it's also somewhat unusual in that we're seeing those high measurements all the way from the coastal cities, all the way to Willamette Valley and to Eastern Oregon too, and we've seen it for several days at a time.
Can you maybe give me a little bit of background on the air quality index? My understanding was that it basically was invented in like 1999 or somewhere around there.
I don't know the exact time frame, but yeah. So the air quality index was developed to basically provide a measure for folks to understand the quality of the air and how it might impact their health. So yes, it's a color coded index. So it starts from 0 to 50, it's good air quality. From 50 to 100, it's moderate, and it goes up from there into unhealthy for sensitive groups, unhealthy for everyone, and then to very unhealthy, and then to hazardous. So we, and across the state have been in that hazardous category for several days now. And again, it kind of relates, the AQI relates to how that impacts folks' health and to some degree what they can do to help protect themselves.
And a coworker of mine was doing a little bit of research on this and saw that Portland, at least, I don't know about the rest of the state, but that Portland did not have an unhealthy rating until about 2015.
That,
Is that correct?
yeah, that's true. I mean, we rarely, if ever, saw any actual smoke intrusions into Portland until 2015. And so what's interesting about that is now we're seeing a trend. So we had those intrusions into Portland in 2015, again in 2017, 2018, and now here we are in 2020. And so from 2015 on forward, we are definitely seeing a trend in increasing intrusions into places like Portland, where typically it would have been very rare. Yes.
And what does that indicate?
Well, it's certainly an indication. It's a consequence of warmer, drier summers, and that having an impact on the prevalence of wildfire. And certainly, then the more wildfires we have, obviously, the more smoky conditions we have around the state. Yes. At the same time, there are certain cities like Medford, for example, and Bend and Prineville, places around the state where wildfire is fairly common. So we might see wildfire and smoke-related impacts on almost a yearly basis in those parts of the states where it's hot and dry, typically in the summer. What's somewhat, again, unusual about this is we're seeing these impacts all the way from the coast to eastern Oregon. And trend-wise, too, it also includes smoke that we're seeing from fires up in the state of Washington, smoke that's coming up from California from all the fires down there. So all of that is contributing to this trends where we're seeing these conditions be, worse than they have been historically now and most likely in the future.
Um, can you kind of help me understand? We've heard the phrase, the air quality is hazardous a lot over like the last week, which is very, frightening to hear. Especially, I think the icon for it is like a person in a gas mask. Can you kind of me what does that actually mean in terms of the like health impacts to say that the air that we're seeing outside is hazardous?
Yeah. So with smoke in particular, what we're measuring is particulate. And it's what we call PM 2.5. They're particles that are size 2.5 microns or less. So they're a fraction the size of a human hair. And particles that size, when we breathe them, they can actually go deep into our lungs and actually be absorbed by the bloodstream. And so smoke particles in that size range can have an adverse impact on folks' health because it impacts the respiratory system, and that's a consequence of that. Yes.
And as bad as it's been in Portland, places that are a little bit closer to the actual fire areas, like Salem, have been measuring like off the scale essentially for the AQI. Um, do we have any conception of what that means in terms of long-term health effects?
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly right. It's off the charts in the sense that our AQI only goes up to 500, and then anything above that, it really doesn't measure any higher than that. I would defer to our partners at the Oregon Health Authority. They're more in tune to kind of the long-term health effects this might have on folks. I defer to them as to kind of what that might look like.
Okay. Um, Now, environmentally, um, you know, we say that this is going to probably, this will eventually clear, and I assume we'll return to normal levels of air quality. Does being under, having this bad of air quality for an extended period of time, does that have lingering environmental effects? Will we be seeing like the aftermath of this for a while, or is it just sort of like a week long occurrence and then things return to a relatively normal state?
Yeah, I mean, and my understanding is yes, these kinds of events they're relatively short term. I mean, they seem like it has an adverse impact for a number of days if you're in Portland, and we're not used to seeing that. But at some point, yes, the smoke will subside. We'll go back to more typical conditions, and so it is a short term impact both on people and on the environment.
Mhm. Now, this I don't know if this is outside of maybe your expertise, but you've said that this is a become a pattern, um, and while this sort of smoke coming into Portland, we've seen it more regularly since 2015. There has been, I know the conditions that kind of started these fires were it was somewhat of a perfect storm situation. But does does this at all is this at all like something that people are going to have to be wary of, or that we're going to maybe see more of in coming summers, like to this degree of air quality?
Um, that's my expectation. I think you're right in terms of the perfect storm because the weather conditions, including east winds, were such that we're seeing this all across the state, and that's typically unusual. But yeah, the trend we're seeing in terms of smoke and our measuring of particulate from those smoke impacts is that it is increasingly likely that we see smoke events that impact cities like Portland and even on the coast. So yes, the trend is that we will likely see more of this in the future.